Bob Levy's joining the meeting.
Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Part of the area where, you know, that company is responsible for. Right. So, I mean, hopefully scientific knowledge has come even further, you know, versus, yeah, we tried a number of steps and then, you know, gauge the effectiveness. That's why it's hard to put everything. She's no.
To absorb that, tapping that with a layer of I am unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, I know that was like holding.
Yeah.
And I've got sure.
Yeah.
You go down to that, this happens. This kind of like you know those concrete junctions kind of see through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just kind of that way. Basically that.
And that's what
Just to sort of stabilize the whole. And some of the things we've done like before project is the big riprap
on top of
on the side.
yeah. Thing. Yeah.
I probably
Should be some science, you know, work out there. Because when we found this bug, and we didn't find it, our chief engineer, you know, hired. Yeah. So I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure every stone.
Oh, and there he is.
I hope so.
No parking.
I hope it doesn't turn into contractors.
Yeah.
These consultants are not cheap.
Yeah. I know, and sometimes not very effective.
Yeah.
Really? I'll let Vince know.
The moment of silence in the airport for 9/11.
In the airport.
Something as rules.
Not that I've been aware of, but I don't know.
We're gonna run this show on time. We're gonna have Bob on the phone, right?
Bob is on the phone, and we did this morning. Yes.
8:46.
Must be. We should have 7. Yep.
Good morning.
I call the meeting to order and acknowledge that Commissioner Levy is on the phone. Note, I am setting in for, well, that's very helpful. Wow, I like that.
Service we can provide.
You know, I
around
don't
here.
do this very often, so I need some OJT as we go. I need a motion and a second to grant leaves of absence to Commissioner Cooperl, Thomas, and Young, who are out of town.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I call for a motion to approve the minutes of the regular commissioner meeting for August 14th. Can I have a motion? I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. And Curtis, it's time for your executive report.
Thank you, Mr. Reigning President. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start first with a bit of recognition that today is 9/11, and want to note, I remember, I think like all of us, the day very clearly 18 years ago. But also want to note our team in the airport this morning who participate in a moment of silence every year, and appreciate our partners over there, TSA in particular, Steve Tabor. Thank you for being here this morning. Just that remarkable day, and the folks whose lives were lost, in particular, folks in public safety, police and firefighters who gave their lives that day serving the public. So just want to think about that for a moment today, and thank you all for joining us in that recognition. Stan, I wonder if you would help us this morning with a safety message.
You bet. My message today is that the Port of Portland is taking actions in observation of National Preparedness Month, and we invite all individuals and families to participate as well. Think about the disaster events reported in the news just this year: tornadoes, flash floods, extreme heat, earthquakes, wildfires, toxic clouds, hurricanes, volcanoes, snowstorms, among others. National Preparedness Month, recognized each September, provides an opportunity to remind us that we all must prepare ourselves and our families now and throughout the year. This year focuses on planning with the theme, Prepared, Not Scared. So, be informed. Know what disasters and hazards could affect your area, how to get emergency alerts, and where you would go if you and your family need to evacuate. Use the emphasis themes and resources at www.ready.gov to get prepared. To that end, the port community has been building resiliency into our infrastructure, our operations, and disaster planning. To connect with our most valuable resources, our people, Emergency Management will be conducting a series of learning engagements with the topics of preparedness and response throughout September. This will include a 4-week port preparation challenge culminating with the Great Shakeout Earthquake Drill in mid-October. In addition, PDX Lifesavers is offering life-saving skills to all port and PDX community employees. That includes first aid, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, an automated external defibrillator, AED, fire extinguisher education, and training, among others. In closing, community leaders agree the formula for ensuring a safer homeland consists of trained volunteers and informed individuals taking action to increase the support of emergency response agencies during disasters. I want to thank the employees that are sharing these tools, education, and training with their fellow employees and with the PDX community. These engagements stimulate additional conversations, serve to mature the port's safety culture, and bring safety home to our families. That's my message today, Curtis.
Great. Thank you, Stan. Really appreciate it. Very briefly this morning, a few things to bring to your attention, Commissioners. First, you may notice in the north tunnel, as you walk from parking over to the airport, a blue wall instead of our 125-year history wall. We decided it was time to move on from the celebration of 125 years of port history, and we've moved to replace it with something much more exciting, I think. Really trying to showcase the rich diversity of the region, indications of home and Portland and Oregon. And we've done that in partnership with the Portland Street Art Alliance. 2 local artists have worked with both port staff and a number of community groups and Great. I just love seeing it, right? It's going to be terrific. Our two artists, Alex Chu and Jeremy Nichols, are going to be starting work, I believe, next week. And so it's going to add a really nice flavor down there of local representation and, again, just great indication of the rich diversity of the region. So a lot of fun stuff in there. I think what you'll find is you'll be able to sort of look around and find different things that really raise issues around the state and raise recognition from blueberries to haystack rock. So really excited about that. The pub crawl. It's pretty interesting to try to get to the heart of what do people think represents Oregon well. And, for some people it's one thing and others it's something else, but it's just a really great piece of work, and really thank all of our local partners for engaging with us. Last month, a few of you I've mentioned this to already, Portland Business Journal awarded the port the healthiest employer in Oregon for organizations between 500 and 1,500 employees. We're really proud of that program and all the port employees who participate, not just headquarters, but at each of our locations as well. Really excited about that. Congress returns to action or inaction this month. In the case of our congressional delegation, we've had great engagement from them this summer. During the recess, we had representatives of the delegation from both Oregon and Washington here touring our e-concourse extension. Congressman Kurt Schrader came out and visited Terminal 6 to talk about exports of Oregon products to Asia. We talked trade directly with Congressman Schrader, DeFazio, just last week. Sat down with Congresswoman Bonamici to talk about the impacts of trade on the region. So just really great engagement from our federal partners. Out at the airport, a few of us are leaving right after commission this morning to go thank folks who are working out at the airport every day for their contribution to making PDX the best airport in America for the 7th year in a row. We're going to be out all this week. A number of our leadership team and business partners across the way thanking employees for everything they do. We hand out little goodie bags. I think it was donuts last year, but something different in mind this year. Is that right, Vince? Cookies. But really excited to share some of the joy of that celebration, the 7th year in a row. It should be a lot of fun too. And then finally on PDX Next, we've got good construction progress out here on E. More work coming out on Concourse B and the parking facility out here. You'll see more and more as we enter the fall and the winter. We're trying to manage all that well and in a way that really protects the safety of those folks doing that work and the folks moving through the facilities. And you'll hear more about that. First and foremost, a couple of you heard about it yesterday. We're launching our first PDX Next communications campaign to get passengers ready and excited about the shift away from A and B concourses. And we'll be saying goodbye to poor, dark, compact Concourse A forever. And you'll see, for starters, a goodbye hello campaign that will really share saying goodbye to some parts of the facility that folks have known for a long time, and hello to brighter, new, more expansive facilities. So really excited about the goodbye hello messages, and expect you'll be seeing them here in the course of the next month. So, Mr. President, those are my comments this morning.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion and second for approval of the executive director's report. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now's the time that we open up the meeting. Yes, come on in.
Mary.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Mary Pivoto. I'm the founder and executive director of Neighbors for Clean Air, a grassroots organization dedicated to protecting Oregonians from air toxics. And I'd like to talk to you this morning about diesel and diesel engines. They are a critical component of our economy, particularly freight movement, construction. Otherwise, they've been an incredible part of the economy for the last 100 to 200 years. But diesel engines also represent a profoundly serious problem in Portland, Oregon, and surrounding Multnomah County. Exhaust from diesel-fueled engines contains toxic air pollutants that present significant threats to public health and contribute to global climate change. Multnomah County, which encompasses the city of Portland, is home to nearly 20% of Oregon's population, has one of the highest rates of diesel pollution in the nation. Area residents are regularly exposed to diesel particulate matter concentrations that are more than 10 times higher than Oregon's health-based standards, and many local communities are exposed to even higher levels of these toxic air pollutants. Portland's diesel pollution places local residents at higher risk of developing cancer, heart attack, stroke, cardiovascular disease, and respiratory disorders, with low-income and minority populations bearing a disproportionate impact and the health of both the exposure and the health impacts. These are most pronounced in communities of color, where it's understood that diesel emissions are 3 times higher in census tracts with higher percentage of communities of color. Children are also particularly vulnerable. They breathe faster and more air intake proportionate to their size, and this can cause permanent damage in lung development and brain development, and it's been associated with lower performance at schools. So diesel-related illnesses contribute to absences from work, school, and drive up healthcare spending. Early action to reduce diesel emissions can also produce long-term climate benefits by reducing atmospheric concentrations of black carbon, commonly known as soot. Black carbon is a type of particulate matter that significantly contributes to climate change by directly absorbing solar radiation. Diesel emissions are one of the primary sources of black carbon. And while it's a very potent climate forcer, it's also short-lived, remaining in the atmosphere for days and weeks compared to other carbon that takes 100 years and decades to get out. So short-term reductions in diesel black carbon can therefore have a profound impact on reducing global temperatures. So, to address this problem, recently Multnomah County and the city of Portland have adopted clean contracting standards, and they've worked to ensure a regional clean air standard by working together and include options for contractor technical assistance and compliance enforcement at a regional level. The state legislature recently directed via HB 2007 that all state-funded projects above a certain threshold in the region also meet the same clean air construction standard. And Metro Regional Government has recently taken this on to promulgate initiative at Metro level to also join the Regional Clean Air Collaborative. So I'm here today because I understand that the Port of Portland has been part of this conversation over the last couple of years with the other regional entities. And so I'm here today to urge you, as its leadership, to move this initiative forward and close an important loop in ensuring that all publicly funded development projects in the region meet this important health and climate protective standard. So thank you so much for your consideration and your time today, and we appreciate the opportunity and hope to continue the conversation.
Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Swarn from Portland. Just this last year, some disgruntled people in Washington State, probably representing no more than maybe 1,000 construction workers, restarted a proposal to replace the I-5 bridge. And they're trying to gather support in Oregon for this. I know there's a variety of opinions. But the reason I mentioned that they represented construction workers, there might have been 1,000 jobs that were lost by the demise of the CRC project, but there's must be 30,000 to 40,000 people working and going to jobs who are tied up in the traffic that we have. And since I worked out in Washington County in the 90s, I began to observe how the traffic paradigm was shifting, the commuting paradigm was changing, and we had a lot of growth in Clark County. And people are going to Washington County for jobs. So I participated in the 2017 Washington County transportation study. This is an executive summary from that. And Susie Lawson from Port of Portland spoke one time. She said the Washington County economy really needed more routes to the ports. And I really think that most people in this area would agree with that. So one of the proposals that emerged in the Washington County study was what they call the Northern Connector, survey west side route from US 26 to US 30. They say it would attract 60% of the truck traffic on US 26 through the tunnel, reduce traffic on US 26, I-405, and I-5 through Portland, shorten truck trips, and improve access to industrial areas in I-5 North. And then also reduce traffic on Cornelius Pass and Germantown roads. I believe that this western route would be a good thing for all modes of traffic. I've talked to TriMet and C-Tran about it, because right now people from Vancouver going to jobs in Hillsborough have at least a 20-mile route there on I-5 and 26, and this would reduce it to 14. So I'm just hoping that the port would support what's called in this study the Northern Connector. I call it the Western Arterial Highway because there should be a component in Washington State that's similar, and it really doesn't need to be an interstate system highway. I don't think it needs to be that big. It can make use of Cornelius Pass, Columbia Boulevard, but there are a couple things that are major. It would need a tunnel under Skyline, but it also needs a bridge on the Willamette, and the site that connects to Columbia Boulevard is that riverbank is owned by the Port of Portland now, from what I can understand from the maps. So that would be, I guess, a port decision if this was to go ahead. So I'm just asking for your consideration of this. I think it's a route that would benefit everybody, and wouldn't need to be a major project, but a bridge across the Willamette would land on port land there, just west of Columbia Boulevard.
Thank you for your time. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Does any commissioner want a presentation of the consent items? Okay. Adoption of fiscal year 2019 to 220. Executive Director performance criteria. I'd entertain a motion in a second.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Vince, introduce our first agenda item, if you would.
Good morning. The first item here is related to the Terminal Core project, which we've been here almost every month and will be here almost every month on Terminal Core work. As you remember, back in November 2017, we got the first bit of funding, $950 million, and happy to announce that we received the remaining $700 million of funding about 2 weeks ago in conversations with the airlines, a formal ballot process, which was not disapproved. So we're now fully funded at $1.65 billion to ensure that we can move forward with this project. So it was a big moment for us to reach this point. It's a big milestone. We've been at this for about 4 or 5 years to reach that point, and so now we can really proceed strongly with moving forward with all of the work, all the design as one big project, which was what we always had envisioned. We just broke it into a couple of pieces for the airlines to get their arms wrapped around a project of that magnitude. So this contract that we have today now as we move forward is for Hoffman and Skanska around the redevelopment of Concourse B. And that's one of the first parts of this project is the demolition of A, and then we move into remodel of Concourse B. So this will be the first big contract that we're moving forward with amendment. And so George is here to talk about the work for that. And then, of course, we'll be back many more times on the rest of the program.
Thank you, Vince. Good morning. So today we're asking for approximately $92 million for the amendment to the Hoffman-Skanska contract, predominantly around the Concourse B construction activities. Here we go. As we've we've talked about the overall T-Corp project goals. We're intending to improve the seismic resiliency of the terminal by constructing about 180-foot addition, the western expansion behind the food court. By doing this, we'll increase the capacity and flexibility of security checkpoints, because the area will be without some of the columns and shear walls that are impacting our flexibility today. With the approval from the airlines of phase 2 of this project, we'll also be able to improve the ticketing, increasing its capacity to about 34 million annual passengers, as well as developing flexibility to be able to react to any changes in processing as we go forward. We'll be increasing the environmental efficiency of the project, and I'll be back next month to talk about a lot of the details around that. We'll also be improving the passenger and customer experience with a flow-through processing for ticketing. Here's a rendering of Concourse B. This is the big portion of this contract amendment. Concourse B will end up with 4 mainline gates, as well as 9 ground load facilities. Here's a rendering of the interior look of Concourse B for the arriving passengers. You'll see the ground load hold room to the left. Up above will be screen door the Commission approved 2 months ago. Overall schedule for the project, as Vince mentioned, we've been doing this for about 4 years now, with a lot of Commission approvals for the Hoffman-Skanska contract amendments, ZGF contract amendments for design, as well as Burns & McConnell for commissioning, and Turner Construction for some pre-construction services. The main portion of the T-Corp project will be continuing design through the end of probably 21. T-Corp itself will start construction early next year for some of the enabling work around the columns. The main portion of T-Corp construction will begin June next year, when terminal balancing comes up, which will include utility relocations in the alleyway between concourses C and D. From a Concourse B perspective, design was complete in April. March, Commission approved the enabling work activities, which will prepare for the relocation of the Horizon operations from Concourse A to the end of Concourse C. That's scheduled for a transition in November timeframe, at which point Concourse B will start. Demolition of Concourse A, which should be complete spring of 2021. We'll be bringing forward a series of contract amendments for Hoffman-Skanska over the next year and a half or so, including the enabling work for the T-Corp project, utility relocations, building structure, structural construction, as well as the guaranteed maximum price for the remainder of the project. These contract amendments are normal and are a part of the construction manager general contract project. Because in this delivery method, we have the opportunity to have a significant overlap in design and construction. Therefore, normal projects we bring to the Commission are design bid build, which are 100% design complete. Then you see the contract. Here we're overlapping design and construction. They were just a normal part of the process. Overall budget for the project is $1.63 billion, which is about a $1.1 billion construction project. Contingency set up at $231 million, which is about 17% of the overall project cost. Funding for this is through the Airline Cost Center. Our overall small business participation goal is about 20%. At this point in time, we're tracking to about 33% for about the first $92 million of contracts that have been committed for Concourse B. This amendment will get the overall Hoffman-Skanska contract up to $144 million. To date, we've awarded $52 million, which includes pre-construction for the T-Corp project, as well as the Concourse B enabling work. We've also added 2 other projects that we're able to implement as a part of this for efficiency, cost savings, and reduction in operational impacts, which are the passenger boarding bridge and the terminal relamp project. This contract amendment's for $92 million, which is predominantly the Concourse B construction. It's about $85 million of it. The remainder is some T-Corp pre-purchase of materials and mock-ups and other early construction activities. Staff recommends approval of the amendment.
Thank
Any
you, George.
questions?
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I'd like to first acknowledge the outstanding small business participation rate on the initial phases so far. I understand it's over 30% against the 20% target. So that I think is, and I understand that that may shift as you go into other parts of the scope of work, but it's a great starting point. Would be also, as we get further and further into it, into some of the detail around just how that's unpacked in terms of MBEs. And if we're continuing to perform on that level. And I don't know, I know this is a unique partnership between Hoffman and Scanza, but do we track them as a single LLC, or are we looking at that participation rate for each of the participants? Because I'm
They're a single LLC on the project. That's where our contract is set up with them. So that's the way we are tracking them.
okay. All right. Well, again, I want to begin and end by just commending the work and the participation at a 33% participation level. It's a great start.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. I'll call for a motion to approve the executive director's recommendation. I need a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Didn't you have the next agenda item as well?
So the next one's design and installation service contract for the PDX Next fire alarm system upgrade. This is a new fire alarm system for not just the terminal building, but about 25 other facilities across the airport. The system that we have today was installed in about 2000, and it really is time for a software upgrade. But when you're doing that, it really begs the question about should you not just look at a whole new system. There's been a lot of technology changes that have happened since then, and we've also obviously had a lot of new facilities here, including the QTA area, and then dealing with Terminal Core, Packer, and everything else. So we took a holistic approach to this one, and rather than just upgrading the old system, we thought we needed to take a much broader look, and so we did that. And Alan is here to talk about our process that we went through and what our recommendation is of the new contract.
Thank you, Vince. Good morning, everyone. This agenda item requests your approval for a contract to Convergent Technologies in roughly the amount of $3.7 million to provide design and installation services for the fire alarm upgrade. As Vince mentioned, and as this graphic depicts, the fire alarm system that we have covers 25 different facilities. It's not just PDX proper, but it's everything from our de-icing to our fire station, maintenance facilities, and several properties such as cargo that are occupied by tenants. Actually, if I can go back, I want to point out, what I'll just mention is that the project is broken down into 3 phases. There was a group of buildings, thank you, in red that we're calling phase 1. These are the smaller outlying facilities, and so we want the upgrade process to begin in the less critical footprint of the project, moving into the headquarters and parking structures in the orange. And then finally, phase 3 at the tail end of the project will be in PDX proper. We felt that that was a great way to manage the risk of this process. So as Vince mentioned, the project really is around upgrading the system. And a major component of that, and what's shown here, is the user interface for the fire alarm. Personal computers are used, but they're very special personal computers. They're UL listed, they're ruggedized, they're industrial equipment. They're out of date. They're running Windows 7. You can imagine, just like at home, you have to migrate to Windows 10 eventually, and that's part of this project. There will be other components, but I think this is the best way to capture for you, give you a feel for what we'll be doing. Pending your approval today for a contract with Convergent, we'll enter into the detailed design process, move into construction next year, and wrap up at the end of 2021. The overall project budget is $7.5 million. We have a contingency of $1.8 million, which is appropriate given the level of design that we have currently in hand. The project costs will be shared by the airlines as well as the port in relation to the footprint and who's responsible for that square footage. We have a small business goal of 3.5%, but Convergent utilized the services of O'Neill Electric, which is a certified DBE firm, and so they're going to provide us 20% participation on their contract, which we're very pleased with. So in summary, staff requests your approval of the executive director's recommendation.
Thank you for your time. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I entertain a motion. I'm sorry.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
First, a comment. Great job on the small business participation goals.
Thank you.
And my second question is looking forward or forward-looking as you're doing the design and installation. What provisions are you making for further software upgrades? And those come much more frequently than at the Win 7 generation now. So is there a provision for that? That's my first question.
Yes, software is a moving target, as we all know. We have a contract with one of the manufacturer's authorized representatives. There are 3 in the area. And that contract provides for ongoing software upgrades. That's both firmware that resides in the control panels, as well as the software that resides on the user interface machines. So that's been covered by our maintenance group. Once the capital project brings it all up to current standards, then we hand it off to the maintenance group for the ongoing support of that.
And that's the port's internal maintenance group or the suppliers?
The supplier will perform the work under the supervision and management of our maintenance group.
And then the other question is what precautions have been taken for security that's also changed since the Win 7 generation?
Yes, access to the system. There are provisions, because it's a proprietary system, automatically access is very limited, and it does reside on the port's network, so Port IT manages the security aspect as far as firewalls, isolating it from the outside world.
So it will just be a part of the normal security coverage that all entities controlled by your IT group.
Yes.
And so it will receive all upgrades and the same type of lockouts and
all the patches.
Access.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just had a follow-up question as well. It sort of piqued my interest in looking at vendors like these. Do we do any due diligence in terms of whether they have experienced security breaches within their software environments?
Great question. I have not followed up on that. I can imagine that there are opportunities for any building automation system, just whether it's HVAC control, access control, life safety. Once you put a system on your network and your network somewhere else is exposed to the internet, there is that risk. I'm not familiar with any instances where the fire alarm system provided an open door to malicious activity. Again, our IT group is very professional and very skilled at managing the interface between the internet and our internal network. So we rely on their expertise. I can certainly talk with them and get back to you with some more details if you'd like that.
Well, I just think it's, as a part of due diligence, it would be great to see if there's any exposure that's coming into what has been a fairly protected environment. I mean, I took some Russian in college, so I'd be happy to help you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of clarifying questions.
Mm-hmm.
The port staff and the contracted services, it says about $2 million. Can you explain that? And for example, port staff, does that mean that you have to hire additional staff members to facilitate this process? That's a lot of money relative to the total contract amount. That's question one.
Okay.
Question two, the contingency 1.8 is pretty high.
Yes.
Can you, explain that? Those two questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You're right. Some of the numbers may look different in terms of the normal ratios and percentages of the breakdown of a capital project. What's unique about this project is it's really more of a design build. We are not fully designing down to the last level of detail in advance of this contract being issued. So the contractor will be performing quite a bit of design work. That design work is going to require a lot of support from port staff because it's an existing system and because of the extent of the footprint of the system, it's not localized. We have a lot of labor involved in assisting the contractor with discovery, their discovery process so that they can provide the design. And more importantly, once we get into implementation, because the fire alarm system connects to doors and security, it connects to the baggage handling, it connects to the HVAC. Every step of the way, we are going to be supervising the contractor very closely and very carefully through our construction department with their inspectors and with our project engineers. This is a very high-touch, high-coverage project. It's not a matter of just approving a contractor submittal and turning them loose. We're going to be with them every step of the way to ensure that the public safety, staff safety, and operations of the port aren't impacted. There's a lot of risk in the project within that. And that partially explains the contingency as well. There are still a lot of unknowns, and we have to maintain a viable contingency to cover unforeseen conditions, unknown conditions, with a system that's 20 years old basically and has its fingers throughout the extent of our facility.
My understanding is that the members of the staff assisting this process will be already employees of the port.
Yes. Correct.
So when you talk about this, does that imply that there is overtime payments because of the extra work? Or, port employees already been paid. They're on our payroll.
Yeah, it's really more of an allocation issue that these folks are here, and if they're not working on this particular project, they may be working on a different project. So we're accounting for that in our financials. So whether they get funded through the operating budget or the capital budget, in this case, these folks are being funded through all the capital projects, which much of engineering already is. I'd also say for this particular project, there's a significant IT component, as we've been talking about. And so if you look at one of our more traditional civil projects of paving and so on, I would say that the port staff proportion is not as high as you're finding on this one, just because of that level of IT staff that's being involved in the project. So it's partly that too.
Thank you very much. The contingency part explained well. I understand that.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the executive director's recommendation. Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion passes. You're both going to present the next.
We're going to stay here. Next one is a public improvement contract for another PDX Next program, and this is for energy efficiency upgrades. And what we do is, rather than do these piecemeal each year, we put a suite together of energy efficiency projects that we can take out to the market. In this case, we've got some lighting and some HVAC improvements that we're going to implement. And so I'll let Alan go through the details on that, but these are all designed to reduce our energy consumption.
Thank you, Vince. We're here to request your approval of a contract to O'Neill Construction Group in the amount roughly of $3 million for construction of the energy efficiency upgrades project. A little bit of background, the port has been aggressively working towards goals to manage our energy consumption and the carbon footprint that results from that energy consumption. We produced a master plan in 2012, which has been guiding those efforts. There were two major portfolios of projects, groups of efficiency measures basically, that were envisioned under that master plan. The first portfolio has been completed as of 2017. This project represents the second portfolio or package of projects to reduce our energy consumption. If successful, the project is estimated to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by about 1,800 metric tons per year, which is very significant. The bulk of the project revolves around lighting upgrades, and I apologize for the quality of these pictures. It's you can blame Apple and my iPhone 5 if you need to. But what you see here are some mock-ups that we installed. On the left, you see gate C7, and the panel, hopefully it's obvious. This area here was retrofitted to LED lamps. We removed the fluorescent lamps. You can see the other sections where the fluorescent lamps remain, and you can see the marked difference in the amount of light that we get from LEDs, even with 50 to 60% power reduction. So it's not only energy efficiency, but I think to Curtis's earlier comment, we're going to have brighter facilities. We also did a mock-up out on Concourse E. You see at gate E1, same effect. The lighting for the circulation area is going to be much improved. It's going to give the existing facilities, not just our new facilities, but the existing facilities kind of a facelift and a refresh. This is an area, gate C20, where we mocked up the hold room lighting. There were fluorescent lamps in these fixtures. We replaced them with LED. Again, my apologies for the photography, but if you can work with me a little bit and trust me on this, these lights are much better. The color, the amount of light is just fantastic. Again, power reduction of 50%. What we were concerned about here was glare. A lot of people have raised issues with LEDs in general about glare because they're a point source of light. We were concerned about that. We surveyed occupants and folks that work in the area, and glare just isn't an issue. So we resolved that. Moving outdoors now, you can see, for example, here in the center, our landmark canopy. All the light fixtures that hang from the canopy will be replaced with LED fixtures. The lights, the fluorescent lights under the roadway that light up the area under the end planing roadway, they'll be relamped. The fixtures themselves won't be replaced, but they will be relamped with LEDs. And then to the east, in front of the parking structure, we'll be replacing these fixtures as well with LEDs, with tremendous reductions in power and improved lighting. One of the measures we're taking to improve safety is to add a few fixtures over crosswalks. For whatever reason, we have some crosswalks that weren't as well lit as they could be, so we'll be adding some fixtures there. Component of the project that's not lighting related is called high-speed roll-up doors. So we have doors. Obviously, we bring baggage into the facility. The bag carts go back and forth to the aircraft. Big openings for that. They have roll-up doors currently, but they are very slow, and so they tend to just get left open in all weather conditions. It's a tremendous heating load on the facility. We have to back up the heat when it's cold outside. So high-speed roll-up doors will be installed to seal off those openings when they're not in use, when they're not in need. There'll be a motion detector that detects a bag cart coming towards the door, opens it very quickly, allows the bag cart to pass through, and then closes again. The schedule for the project, again, pending your approval of the contract today, because it is fully designed, we'll be entering into construction quickly, and we should be wrapping it up in the second half of 2021. The overall budget is just under $6.4 million. We have the contract as well as port services and contracted services and a contingency of just over $1 million. Again, this project will be shared in terms of the cost between the airlines and the port in proportion to the square footage of the footprint of the project. This one's a very good story as well on SBE. We had a goal going into the bid of 7%, but because O'Neill is themselves a certified DBE and MBE firm, we're going to deliver over 90% of the contract through certified firms. In conclusion, the staff requests your approval of the executive director's recommendations.
Thank you. Questions?
I'm looking at the numbers on the energy savings of 50% and 75%, and just the magnitude of our energy consumption at multiple facilities. Did we explore energy savings performance contracts for the airport?
Yes, in fact, the portfolio one that I mentioned, the first package of projects was performed under a performance contract. That was with Johnson Controls. What we learned from that pilot process was that the advantages that the performance contracting model offers really didn't apply to this project. It's a pretty straightforward project in terms of the savings that will be generated by the lighting improvements. We have capital funding, so we weren't looking for outside funding. The risk is very manageable in terms of delivering the savings. You replace a 400-watt lamp with a 200-watt lamp, and there's very little risk that the savings will accrue. So we made a judgment that the performance contracting model really wouldn't be of benefit to the port.
Okay, I understand that, and that would be in the context of just looking at lighting. But I think when you incorporate it into a broader context of energy consumption, whether it's HVAC systems and wherever else or operating machinery or wherever else we use energy, did we look at it in the holistic context? And it's things like windows and insulation and roofing and much broader than just lighting. Did we explore performance contracting in that context? Because obviously our facilities are going to be here for a long time. And if we could pay for the capital investment out of the energy savings, it seems like it would have been something that the economic model would be different than just for lighting.
Yeah, I suppose part of the answer to that is that this portfolio of projects was assembled through a comprehensive, holistic analysis of the facility and the opportunities that we have in the facility to conserve energy. We wanted to make cost-effective investments, so certain things like glazing, more efficient windows, adding insulation to the building, they fell off the list. Lighting is a very effective improvement in terms of energy efficiency upgrades. These roll-up doors have a very good payback as well. So I think the basic answer is yes, we're basically performing a performance contract in-house. We're providing the funding, we're providing the technical expertise, we're providing the oversight of the design, and we're performing the measurement and verification to ensure that the results are delivered. So it's really, if you want to think of it, an in-house performance contract as opposed to outsourcing that.
So thank you. So of the 50%, 75% savings, those are percentages of our savings. Did you run the numbers on what that equates to in dollars? In other words, so if you're looking at this in a contracting, so if we're getting 50% energy savings and the size of the contract, I mean, how does that offset the size of this contract?
Just as a full disclosure, I come from the performance contracting industry. I managed the local office for Ameresco for 3 years, and I worked for Siemens and Johnson Controls prior to that. So I prepared a cash flow model. You might recognize one of these, very similar to what those companies do. In fact, very similar, almost identical to what they do. And so the financial results of the analysis, which I've run by the Ports Finance Group for validation, are that the modified internal rate of return for the project is 3.8%. The net present value is just over $500,000, $500,000. So we've got all the financial metrics, if that's what your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's the size of what we're chipping away at the contract by our energy savings.
Oh, sure. So the savings produced by this project are forecasted to be about 2.5% of our port overall energy consumption. So, it's not a 20% reduction in our overall consumption, but it's not insignificant. We're a big organization, and so getting a 2.5% bite out of the apple, we feel is actually pretty significant.
Thank you. You've answered my questions. You have credibility in the space. You've done your homework, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks for the questions. Sure. Right. I should have rehearsed this a little bit more, but my annual energy cost savings are $180,000 roughly. and then that escalates gradually as utility rates go up.
Is that a year?
That's annually, yes. And then there are significant maintenance savings. The relamping of all the fixtures will really minimize maintenance a lot in the first couple of years, and then over time, LEDs have about double the useful life of fluorescent lamps. So it's actually a pretty significant portion of the financial effectiveness of the project in terms of maintenance savings, not having to be up there replacing lamps all the time.
Any other questions or comments? All right. I'd entertain a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. You can make a clean getaway now.
That's great.
Yeah, they're good.
All right, our next item here is an amendment for the parking addition and consolidated rental car facility, or PACR, which is with J.E. Dunn. Back in November of last year, we approved a guaranteed maximum price for the J.E. Dunn contract, but at the time, we were looking at the potential of adding some additional scope items that we just hadn't finished negotiations with Dunn at the time. So while we're in the area of where the PACR project is, there's an opportunity to add some additional conduit, which will allow for some resilience and redundancy in our utility infrastructure. And this is the time to do it, is now, and J.E. Dunn is the contractor to do it. So we've now finished all of our negotiations on that, and it was not originally included in the original scope of the work that they had. So Eric is here to request your approval of an amendment to the contract with Dunn to do this work.
Thank you, Vince. Today I'm requesting approval to amend a public improvement contract to J. Dunn Construction Company for a change order to add some electrical and communications pathways for future growth and flexibility of our underground infrastructure here at PDX. Major scope elements are shown with reference to the final site plan of the PACR facility. Scope of work is listed above. This change order will add enough conduit to our underground infrastructure to stretch from here to Rocky Butte. I ran the numbers myself. All of this work is for future projects and built-in flexibility of our underground infrastructure to support master planning efforts and future projects. We've been planning this work, as Vince mentioned, for quite some time, but negotiations were not complete last November, and we finally wrapped it up. Schedule is as shown. Construction defined by this contract began last August, and we're going to be substantially complete by the end of calendar year 2021. So this slide shows the monetary progression of J. Dunn's contract to date, with the item defined by this agenda is in bold. Budget is summarized as shown. Funding for the PACR project is through the Port Cost Center. Small business participation for this contract is still 10% for design services and 15% for construction services. J.E. Dunn is currently on target to meet these goals. Goals for this work also apply to the work defined by this change order. Staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation.
Questions or comments?
You mentioned that this change order would cover what I'm assuming is work that fall within the scope of other projects. Has there been the ability to sort of look at the cost offsets that would then accrue to this change order but be reduced in the other projects? I understand the timing and it makes perfect sense, but I'm just trying to figure out if there's good news on the other end of this.
Yes, that's true. We're going through that exercise as we speak.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some where you're leveraging about 4 times the savings on some of the elements of the construction. So for spending an extra $200,000, you're saving up to $2 million in construction savings at a later point in time. So each one of those lines that were up on that chart, we identified specific projects and that our savings are being accrued to. So we have done that work.
Well, this is a very small percentage of the cost of the total project. What triggers a change order? I mean, it's minuscule, relatively speaking.
It's anything past what's defined specifically in the contract.
The scope of work much more than the
Yeah, change orders can be as little as $500. In this particular case, Packer is a very large project, so conduit runs multiply and really impact the eventual cost.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, could I have a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendation? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
I'm going to
Final
do
agenda
I'll do my next intro from back here. We got 2 people who are going to come up and present the next item.
Very good.
So this next item here is some closed circuit TV and access control system upgrades for Terminal 4 and Terminal 6. It's good that this is happening on September 11th, and the security changes that we have, and we're not all just at the airport. And so the marine terminals as well are obligated to provide security upgrades and security systems. And so I thought it would be a good idea to have Fred Meyer here, and Fred is in charge of our security program on the marine terminals. And so I thought it'd be good for him to talk a little bit about what our program is, how it works, and all the changes that have gone on since 9/11. We were a little bit later on the marine side. It wasn't until 04 that we ended up having to implement a lot of these things. So talk about this particular contract for these upgrades on the system. So Fred, why don't you go ahead and go through it?
Thank you, Vince, and thank you all for the opportunity to provide some background on the need for this proposed marine terminal security upgrade that you're going to hear about from Ben. This will enhance our security posture and overall maritime domain awareness across several hundred acres of port property, as you can see in your package, immediately adjacent to the Columbia and Willamette rivers with their vital federally maintained channels. In the same post-9/11 environment that saw large increases in security infrastructure here and at all our airports, the Maritime Transportation Security Act, or MTSA, changed security culture in the entire maritime community. It became effective, as Vince said, in 2004. It impacted hundreds of ports and thousands of facilities across the nation and many more U.S. vessels. Its intent was clear: to protect U.S. maritime industry and commerce, as well as the national marine transportation system. Most critically, its goal was to prevent a transportation security incident, something newly defined after 9/11, a loss of life on the water, serious environmental damage, or transportation system and economic disruption. To accomplish all this, the MTSA established security requirements for waterfront facilities and merchant vessels where very little had existed before. That meant a lot of expenses up front to come up to speed quickly, requiring approval of both facility and vessel security plans and periodic assessments by the Coast Guard and other federal agencies. A central requirement in the Port of Portland's facility security plan is a robust terminal security monitoring system. Why? Because I already said we have hundreds of acres that we monitor down there on the river. Because of the expansiveness, like I just mentioned, of the hundreds of marine terminals nationwide, federal funding has been allotted annually for the Port Security Grant Program, a program managed by FEMA. It helps ports fund the significant upgrades I've just mentioned and the maintenance of those. Physical fencing, surveillance systems, as we've talked about, transportation worker identification credential establishment and funding of portable readers of those systems. Over the years, the port has successfully applied this funding and used it to improve many parts of our terminal security infrastructure. Gatehouses have been completely replaced. Initial camera and access control systems were funded through this Port Security Grant Program, and those were installed in 2007, 2008. Well, here we are, 10 to 11 years later. We're at the end of that system's useful life. Spare parts no longer available. Realizing our system must be replaced about 2 years ago, we applied for and were granted $1.2 million of federal port security grant funding. With this grant, there's a 25% funding match by the applicant, us. This project updates and upgrades these systems, will improve security through effective and better cameras, a more secure wireless canopy, upgraded access control at both our vehicle and personnel gates to speed access and facilitate commerce. As you'll hear from Ben, Port Engineering has gotten us to a point where we're ready to start construction with your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Morning, my name is Ben On. I'm from Inisi Group, Inc., and I'm working in a temporary capacity as an engineering project manager for the port, and I'm here to present this item. I'm here to request approval of a design, furnish, install contract to Convergent Technologies for Terminal 4 and 6 CCTV and access control system in the approximate amount of $800,000. The work areas are here. Terminal 6 are throughout the entire Terminal 6, which is on the north here along the south bank of the Columbia River, and Terminal 4, which is on the north bank of the Willamette River. Work scope elements, the access control system will be capable of integrating with the TWIC card system. The TWIC is, as Fred mentioned, the Transportation Worker Identification Credential, which is required by the Maritime Transportation Security Act for workers who need access to secure areas of maritime facilities and vessels. CCTV system will replace cameras and screens to monitor the security of the site, including access at the guard gates, and the wireless canopy system will provide integration for all systems. With your approval, design from the systems integrator will start immediately and be completed in the first quarter of 2020, with construction completing in August of the same year. The systems integrator design, furnish, install contract will be for $798,000. Contingency represents 14% of the total project cost. Funding source is the general fund, and a majority of the hard cost is to be reimbursed by the awarded FEMA grant. Our DBE goal was set at 6.5% in the RFP, and the contractor has proposed a 30% participation. Staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
So how much are we doing with Convergent? Didn't we, I think the contract we just approved was also them, right, for the terminal here?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, on fire.
I do not know what the contract amount was for the...
Yeah, no, I'm just, so we have multiple contracts
Yes.
with them, and I'm just calling it to attention, I guess. Just, we got a lot going on with them.
Yeah, I have the same question, and I had the same question as I did prior on the IT engagement. I'm assuming it will be similar and
Correct. This is very heavy IT
covered
involvement in this type of project, yes.
for both, as stated earlier, for firmware and software, and
Correct.
And
They
they
have,
have-
the IT has set that in place, and they have separate software contracting set in place for the system.
so are the upgrades, is it the same? The upgrades are covered, the expertise on both the port side and the supplier side?
Correct, correct. The software is, they do have in their contract for a maintenance agreement, and so that'll continue on with any upgrades needed for the software.
Is that a yearly agreement? And does it cover just this particular system, or will it?
Yes, it just specific for our CCTV and access control systems.
In regards to,
I would
oh,
probably recommend, it's not for discussion here, but I think perhaps we should just have a separate topic on all the security and IT and just to educate all the commissioners. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, it's fitting that we're doing this on, especially on the port security side, that we're doing it on September 11th.
Yes.
And there were initiatives underway at the federal level on port security that were initiated by the late Senator Fritz Hollings of South Carolina, and trying to pursue this. And I think it really got kickstarted post 9/11. And it was the Marine consideration and others that when the TSA was being, the creation of the TSA was being debated after 9/11. Its initial name was the Aviation Safety and Transportation Agency, and we changed the name to the Transportation Security Administration because it was about all transportation, which included maritime and rail and truck and everything else, pipelines. And but I think it's just fitting that we're acknowledging this on 9/11, but there's a lot of history to the port security component of what's being done, which was underway prior to 9/11, and really this act that we're mentioning in this contract was really kicked into gear after 9/11 out of port security consideration. So I just say that as kind of a comment, but for some context, but I'm fully supportive of moving forward on it. And I think duly noted on the security integration, it's kind of like what's the holistic view, and how do these systems talk to each other, and how are they encrypted to prevent breaches? And I think it's a good question to ask about, I mean, airport security, port security, we've got a lot of moving parts, a lot of risk, a lot of vulnerability, and I think do a very good job and focused on the safety side of our operations, but and have done a pretty good job to date. And I don't know if it's because we're skilled or because we're lucky or a combination of both, but I think that I don't think we can ever get to a point where we're too secure. But there are always bad people attempting to do bad things, and we unfortunately have to spend a lot of money to address it. And it's a little bit of an impediment on commerce, but critical investment nonetheless. But anyway, I just say that as a comment, and being mindful of the importance of it on this particular day. So.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and just I like the idea of a review, the total picture, and pointing out, sometimes it's more efficient and cost effective and higher quality to have the same provider on multiple systems, and sometimes it's not. So I think that would be an important part of our review and understanding. But I support this as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I'd entertain a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank
We
you.
stand in adjournment.
Thank you.
Officially done, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it's fun to have we spend more time on the smaller contracts. To look at
It's
the
funny,
ones
you
we
got
have.
92 just to clarify. Or...
Oh,
yes, you did, man. You got a lot of these coming. Big chunky contracts. Yeah, mostly the airlines.
And nice job.
Nice work. Yeah, it's good. I actually like have a little conversation. Interested in the IT security conversation. I think that'd be good. Maybe we'll do that task force, but broadcasting.
I think you might want
vulnerabilities.
Right? You could even do like executive. You wanted a secure conversation. I don't know what tools you have publicly to do that, but
I think this should
And virtual, like, are they, does it trade? Yeah, and that's where.
I looked at their website and everything else, and I'm not concerned about us over contracting anything. I was just calling
No,
this.
but there's, I don't
We had two,
think
incidentally, we had two of the and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Exactly. I was
I would ask this
But that's the whole thing.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I just didn't. I was thinking. Yeah.
after those trainings and went over, are you going to say
Right,
Fred worked for me, that's why I'm here today, but
yeah, absolutely.
That's good.
Quite quick, and the attention is very limited. Because they were not taking care of so so kind of a sitter, especially
Oh, it's the one.
are they willing to basically shut their
I would do 19 minutes.
or
We'd be investing for
but whatever. Yeah, so it's just like, there's just